The concept behind this movie is genuinely terrifying, and it's based on a true story. Let's do it. I did a super in-depth deep dive of this movie on my podcast, and I also talk about the true story behind it, so check that out if you want more. The link is in the link tree in my bio. Exorcism of Emily Rose opens up by introducing us to this woman, Erin, who is an attorney, and we learn that she has taken on the case of Father Richard Moore. Father Moore is being charged with negligent homicide after an exorcism that he conducted went wrong, and it killed a 19-year-old girl, Emily Rose. Father Moore is offered a plea deal where if he pleads guilty, he's going to get very minimum punishment, and the Archdiocese wants him to take this plea deal so that the church doesn't get too much attention. And Erin unsuccessfully also tries to convince him to take the plea deal, but he ultimately refuses. And he refuses because he says that he wants to go on the stand and tell Emily's story. So the trial begins and we are told through flashbacks what happened to Emily Rose. We learn that Emily lived on a farm with her parents and several of her younger siblings. And she ended up going away to college despite the fact that her parents really didn't want her leaving home. But when she got to school, she started to see things and her hallucinations started to get more and more vivid and violent. So during the trial, the prosecutor, Ethan Thomas, is trying to prove that these hallucinations were caused by some sort of schizophrenia or other mental illness. So her hallucinations get increasingly worse. One day she sees all these black-eyed figures in the church, and her friend walks in to see her with her body completely contorted. And eventually it gets bad enough that she has to drop out of school and go back home. So Emily went home and she started being treated with medications for epilepsy, schizophrenia, and some other things. But when Emily's condition didn't improve, she consulted with their family priest, Father Moore. And he concluded that he believed Emily was being possessed by a demon. So Emily believed him and stopped taking all of her medications so she could seek a more spiritual treatment. And Father Moore says in court that he believes that the reason that the exorcism failed and didn't work was because of Emily's medication that she had been taking. So the medication blocked some part of her brain activity and caused the exorcism to be unsuccessful. As the trial goes on, Erin starts to experience some weird paranormal activity, including waking up every night at 3 a.m. and smelling some sort of burning. And Father Moore tells her that he was experiencing the same thing and still is. Erin ends up calling in an anthropologist to the stand to talk about cultural beliefs on demonic possession, but everybody kind of dismisses her as nonsense. And Erin says to Father Moore, if only we had a medical doctor on our side. And that's when she's contacted by Dr. Cartwright. Father Moore wanted to protect him from being involved in this, so he didn't tell Erin about it. He's a medical doctor, and it turns out he was actually there on the night of the exorcism. And not only was he there, but he recorded the whole thing on a cassette tape, which he then gives to Erin. And Dr. Cartwright agrees that he is going to appear in court. That night, Erin experiences more supernatural shit when she is lying asleep, and at 3 a.m., the cassette tape starts playing on its own, and she is awoken by the sound of Emily's screams. The next day, Erin submits the recording as evidence and it plays in court, and we get one of the most iconic exorcism scenes in a movie ever. In this scene, Emily says that she has 6 demons within her, one of which being Lucifer, the devil in the flesh. Fun fact about this scene, Jennifer Carpenter did so well at playing a possessed person that at one point they called cut because the crew literally was terrified and thought that she had actually become possessed. Now the next day, Dr. Cartwright is supposed to show up in court and he doesn't. And when Erin goes to find him, she witnesses him get hit by a car and die. So Erin is distraught at this point, she's scared, and she goes back to her office where she's confronted by her boss who tells her, if you let Father Moore take the stand one more time, you are fired. We can't have this nonsense anymore. But when she goes to tell Father Moore about this, he convinces her otherwise. So the next day, Father Moore once again takes the stand, and this time he reads a letter that Emily had left him before she died. This letter was written by Emily on the morning of the exorcism that caused her death. And she tells Moore that in a dream the night prior, she was visited by the Virgin Mary. And she was given a choice that she can either be taken to heaven now or she can stay and endure this pain and suffering. However, through her pain and suffering, a lot of people would learn about God. So she decides to stay and endure this suffering, and as a result, she gets the stigmata in her hands. Now, the prosecutor tries to object and say that the wounds in her hands were self-inflicted injuries. So Father Moore has said everything he's wanted to say, he's told Emily's story, and it's time for the jury to make a decision, and they come back with a guilty verdict. However, they then ask the judge to give Father Moore a sentence of time served, which he agrees to. And she tells him, you are guilty, Father Moore, but you are free to go. The movie ends with Erin and Father Moore visiting Emily's grave, and Father Moore saying that he believes one day Emily will be recognized as a saint. And in a final title card, we learn that Father Moore never attempted to appeal his conviction.